Hey! Welcome to the 5th episode of I'm in the Band, a podcast hosted by me, Allison Wolfe.
I can see what you're going to say to me if I don't explain it away. I'm in the band and I deserve to be here and I do anyway.
Every month, I'll be talking with different punk musicians and artists, door-kicking, ceiling-smashing people who've made their art their way. This time, I'll be speaking with guitarist and singer in the Raincoats, Ana de Silva. The experimental British punk band she started with art school pal Gina Birch in the late 70s influenced many women in music, including riot girls like me.
A feeling of being followed, a feeling of being watched.
I hung out with Ana and her partner, Raincoats collaborator Shirley O'Loughlin, first at their apartment in London.
It was
Not
just like,
things like
Vicky,
that,
we
yeah.
told you so, you know.
But our interview got interrupted by takeaway,
That's a long ring.
drinks, gossip.
The problem is, Palmolive wanted to leave.
So we continued the conversation later in New York when the Raincoats came out to do some talks and secret shows for the release of a new book by Jenn Pelly. She profiles the band's self-titled debut album, and she really gets it. She describes the Raincoats' music as a celebration of the female interior life. Ana started by telling me about her life before the Raincoats.
My name's Ana de Silva. My full name is quite big. It's Ana Paula de Lima Peter da Silva. I'm a founder member of the Raincoats. I was born in Madeira, which is a Portuguese island. It was a small town where I lived, 100,000 people. We didn't have an airport at the time. We didn't have television in Madeira. There weren't many newspapers and they only came sporadically. So it was very cut off from culture, from other places. I always liked music, but I never thought it was something I would ever do. I feel like I grew up with music because when I was 10, I was listening to rock and roll, and then I was listening to French music that was coming into Portugal. Then I came to England with my sister because my mum was a English and German teacher, and at that time, the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night had just come out.
It's been a hard day's night.
They already had 3 albums and the Rolling Stones had only 1 album. I remember this clearly because we bought them and we wrote our names on them. And I bought a black polo neck sweater and I bought a kilt as well. That was the coolest thing you could imagine.
So why on earth should I moan? 'Cause when I get you alone.
It was only when I went to Lisbon to the university that I started having more things to look at and to listen to, and there was also a political system that was very stifling. And then at the end of my course in 1974 there was a revolution.
Censorship was at an end, freedom of speech restored, elections promised, and most important of all, the end of Portugal's colonial wars in Africa seemed at last to be an attainable goal.
It's called the Carnation Revolution because the soldiers that were going in the streets had put carnations in their guns. And mainly it was because the army was fed up of going to these stupid wars that nobody was going to win, and you only lose in wars anyway.
200,000 people took to the streets, strewing red carnations and dancing with the troops.
And the students were making some demonstrations and meetings whereby people would speak about it and say what they thought. There would be revolutionary songs as well against the status quo and all that. While I was still at university, my sister gave me an acoustic guitar, and I just sit there in my bedroom playing, John Baez songs and Bob Dylan songs.
Oh, all the money in my whole life I spent.
And a friend of mine used to say, "Oh, you should go to London and get a band." I just used to think she was crazy, saying something like that, because to me that was crazy. And then I came to London, I went to art school, and that's where I met Gina. And at that time, when I was at art school, punk started. I started going to gigs and see all those early bands. The Slits came and played in our college and everything. And we went to see them play live, and we just seemed to think, oh, let's start a band. We didn't think too seriously, but we still did it and started like as a bit of a joke in a way. And it went from there.
Stop here!
You and the Raincoats and the Slits and all these bands, X-Ray Specs, Kleenex, all these bands were big inspirations to me and to Riot Girl and Riot Grrrls, and a lot of people in Olympia, Washington. So I was wondering, what was it like coming up in a scene that maybe you didn't have as many role models or examples of women doing this type of music or whatever? Was there anything that inspired you to make you think you could start playing or being in a band?
The thing that inspired us to start a band was the punk idea that you didn't really need to know how to play very well. You just had to have something to say and had the energy to do it. That was one thing. But obviously, seeing the Slits playing and Palmolive being somebody that Gina knew, I didn't know her so well, but she was neighbors with Palmolive's sister. It sort of made them kind of a bit more on our level than the other bands that we had known. They were all sort of mythical figures kind of thing. And that was these girls, you know, doing this thing that they didn't know exactly what they were doing, but they had so much to say just by being there. Just the fact that they were even just there. But the music was great and the songs were great. And so that was very inspiring. I had heard other women playing things. I loved Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell, but it was a different thing. I never thought, I didn't even write poetry or anything, so I didn't think I could ever do that. And it was just by starting the band and thinking, well, we haven't got any songs. Oh, well, I'll try to write a song. I think one of my first songs might have been Black and White. I didn't know where it was all going to go. It was just a question of just really doing it and finding out, actually, this is okay. Because if you just think, oh, that person, oh, they're so great, I can never be like them. I loved Patti Smith, but I never thought I could be like her. So that didn't inspire me to do my thing. Of course, she was inspirational. When I first saw her and I thought she was such an amazing person, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be like her. But when you, Riot Girl, you, Allison, Wolfe, who I'm talking to, when we found out that you had been so inspired by what we were doing, it just made me feel like everything had been worth doing, which before I wasn't so sure. I thought people that had bought our records to start with had them on their shelves and probably didn't listen to the records anymore. And then we found out that there's this sort of hunger for some of our songs that weren't available, and you were all kind of giving tapes to each other with one song or two songs and kind of relating to it and being inspired by it. For us, it was just one of the happiest things of my life, really.
Wow.
Yeah, really.
I do think about when I first started playing music or doing a fanzine, and we were passing mixtapes around to each other, and your song Fairy Tale in the Supermarket was on everyone's mixtape, at least in the Northwest. When I hear that you were obscured from history, or maybe felt written out of history, it seems wild to me, because everyone in Olympia was talking about the Raincoats, and that had a lot to do with Calvin Johnson, Toby Vale, and so it's wild to me that you know, when people say that Kurt came in and rediscovered you guys, I mean, I know that's not exactly how it happened. Well, it certainly wasn't, because we all know where he got a lot of his influences was from the people in Olympia. So really the Raincoats were kind of a household name in our scene.
Yeah, I realized that, and we were already thinking of re-releasing the albums on CD because we hadn't done that yet. This was 94 or 3 or something. But because Kurt, who was the most famous Riot boy, because he was on Geffen and he liked us, then Rough Trade licensed the music to Geffen. And because a lot of people knew Nirvana, and that's how a lot of people discovered us, but he didn't discover us, we were there.
I guess going back a little, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the conditions under which you all were living and practicing and forming your band.
Well, when we very first started, we were rehearsing in my living room. I lived in a flat. It was very cheap rent. I can't remember how much, but it was very cheap. And that's where we started. We just had 2 practice amps. One would have 2 guitars, the other one bass and vocals. All these 4 things went through 2 little practice amps. As we changed lineups and everything, we ended up going to Gina's basement, where she was, which was a squat. We didn't have much money, but I've never considered myself poor. I always tried to have money, so by having jobs, working at Rough Trade and in restaurants. And then when we started recording, we got a bit of money off the recordings and went on tour and stuff. Well, the tours didn't actually make money. I lost money, and I had a big row at Rough Trade because suddenly there's some person there said, we have to take money off the royalties of the record because you lost money on the tour. And I was livid because I didn't know that was going to happen. And I had a big row and threw a chair at somebody or something.
Wow.
And probably said a few words that are nice to repeat on a podcast.
What was the songwriting process with the Raincoats? Because, there's so many different elements. And I've also heard that there's a communal aspect to your band.
Well, we never lived together. Mm-hmm. Any of us, that would be too much, believe me. But our rehearsing wasn't so much to perfect the songs, it was more changing things, and it was more like composing than actually getting it really tight. Even if we play the song 10 times and we're going to do a gig the next day, the 10th time we'd play that song, it's something still would change. In every gig, you always had to be thinking, is it 2 bars there, or is it 5 beats there, because it would be always changing all the time. So the reason why everything is so different is because we spend so much time with the songs. In my case, I used to bring the lyrics and the guitar part.
So is it mostly the person who's singing at that time wrote the lyrics?
Yes,
okay.
Mostly. Except that I had more songs than anybody else. So Gina ended up singing Palmolive's Adventures Close to Home, because Palmolive didn't sing. So when you hear Gina singing a song, it's hers, or anything. Mine are always all mine.
Mentioned the song Adventures Close to Home. Didn't the Slits also do that song?
What happened with Adventures Close to Home was that Palmolive wrote when she was still in the Slits, but they didn't get to the point of actually doing it. So when she came to us, she wanted to do it, obviously, because it was her song. But Tessa in the Slits really liked it and wanted them to do it. And Palmolive wanted Tessa to sing it. So they did a version, and we did a version, and we didn't know each other's versions. It's independently we did it.
Don't take it personal. I choose my own fate. I follow along and follow.
I know that Palmolive was in both bands, but I didn't know the history of her coming to the Raincoats from the Slits, or if she was in both bands at the same time, or...
Palmolive was chucked out of the Slits. As simple as that. I think they were wanting somebody tighter. They didn't care so much of the way she expressed herself with her drums. To me, it doesn't matter if it goes out of time and faster and slower. It's fine. But with them, I think they wanted a sort of maybe more reggae-ish kind of thing. So they chucked her out. So when she got chucked out of the Slits, that was winning the lottery for me, having her come into our band. So she came to a gig, brought some tablas and played along with whoever was drumming at the time in that gig. And then we started practicing together and rewriting the songs.
Well, her energy is incredible. And she's such an amazing personality, too. Was forming your band as all women, was that intentional? And were you intentionally feminist in what you guys were doing?
When I was growing up, my experience at home was that my parents were equal to each other. My mother completely believed in voting, which might seem a bit silly these days, but in those days it was not such a taken for granted thing. And I had heard of feminism, and I could not see why women couldn't do exactly the same as men. It wasn't really in my mind that you couldn't do it. Maybe it was in my mind that I couldn't do it because maybe I didn't think I was good enough, but I didn't see why women couldn't do things. When we started the band, my ideal actually was having 2 women and 2 men, because I thought that was the thing that you should strive for. And we were like that for a while, with different men coming in and out. And then when Palmolive joined, because she had been in the Slits and she liked the idea of having an all-women band, she put an ad in a shop, in a bookshop, for somebody to join the band. And Vicky saw it, picked it up, and so that nobody else would see it, and came to talk to us and came to see us play, and joined the band. I liked that idea. After we were 4 women, it felt really good. Not that the men that we had were controlling, or they took us for what we were and accepted us and respected us. But when we were all women, it was really good. And especially because it's the women that they were, like Palmolive. I mean, could you get a better drummer than that? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
Vicky was great with the violin too. We went on tour in '79, right after we released our EP, which was Fairy Tale in Supermarket, In Love and Adventures Close to Home. And Rough Trade put this package, which was us, Kleenex, and it was supposed to be Cabaret Voltaire. But I think the story is that their girlfriends weren't too keen that they went on tour with 8 girls. So so they gave us Spiz Energy instead. And so we did about a month a tour. Gina hated it so much. She thought it was the worst time of her life. I just did it. I just thought, well, this is tour. There was 12 people in the van. It was a bit crowded, but when you're young, you kind of can go on top of an airplane and or on the wings of an airplane and you're happy. But, she wasn't, so we never did another tour like that. We only do, I don't even think we've ever done a tour of 10 gigs after that. Unlike most American bands that go on tour forever. When you're in a band, it can get a bit claustrophobic. If you're in a space together as well and you start thinking, oh, I wish they wouldn't do that while they're sitting next to me, or, or whatever, just the presence of the person, I suppose, can become quite overpowering if you're traveling with them constantly. Do you agree with me? Have you been on tour?
Oh, yes. And you're right.
Like that.
It's very hard. It's funny, too, because I haven't really toured since much. A little bit, but since 2008. I miss it so much. And then once you get on the road, you're like, oh, I forgot about this.
Want to go home?
It wasn't so much wanting to go home, but
Yeah.
it's like, no, we don't stop every hour for a smoke break. Just stuff like that. But anyways, whatever.
Yeah, it's all that stuff. You really have to listen to other people as well as they have to listen to you.
And was there any drama or stories that you care to retell?
Yeah, it wasn't easy at times because, for instance, Palmolive, we knew she was going to leave. She was great and everything, but it's just the knowing that that was it. It was quite upsetting, and her mind was a bit somewhere else. Also, the singer from Kleenex wasn't getting on with the rest of the band, and she would disappear, and she was going to leave as well. But I got on well with Kleenex and with our band, kind of, as much as you can get on with 12 people in a van. People think it's glamorous. You're on stage and you play music. Isn't that great? But for 23 hours of the day, things are not always that smooth.
Right. People forget that, you're only on stage for 1 hour and then
Yeah.
all the rest is like work, half play, but there's a lot of work involved. Did the Raincoats ever face any discrimination of any sort, or do you have any stories or examples of anything like that?
Well, personally, I was a bit oblivious to that. Raincoats fans usually seem to be quite nice people and a bit nerdy. Maybe Gina would have a different opinion to me, but obviously it was inherent in society. But I didn't feel that too much. Rough Trade was really, really welcoming to us. They embraced us. There was never any suggestion that we should look like this or look like that or do this or do that. They just took us as we were. And I think that's a big thing. We had sometimes sound people can be a bit, they're girls, they don't know about microphones and about things like that. But I didn't encounter that very much, personally.
Maybe you can describe some of the dynamics between the people in the band and perhaps how that led to the breakup of the Raincoats.
Yeah, it's very difficult to explain exactly because I suppose everybody has their version of why we split up. But there was 6 of us. At that point, there was 3 men and 3 women, 2 drummers, and a guy playing saxophone as well. And for me, it was getting a bit out of hand. And people were talking about having hit records and bringing all these influences of funk music. And I loved all that music, but I just didn't think it was me. I wanted to do something that came from us. I don't know if Gina and Vicky were feeling the same or not. They were definitely not in tune with me, or I wasn't in tune with them. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. So we decided to finish the band, because I wouldn't have it just me leaving the band. That band was mine. I wouldn't be like Palmolive. It was my band as well as other people, but if I left, the band couldn't exist anymore.
Have been in flames all night. The sun won't have eyes for her again.
How did you meet Kurt Cobain?
He went to Rough Trade and asked if they had our album. Our album wasn't available anymore and there was no repressing or anything. So they said no, but Anna works up the road if you want to go and meet her and ask if she's got a copy. When he came to talk to me, I didn't know who he was. Later I found out it was Nirvana. I didn't have one, but somebody else from Rough Trade had a spare copy. So I wrote all these things, stuck some lyrics from a booklet that I made, and got everybody else to sign, because they all lived, Gina lived near and Vicky lived near, so I got them to sign the inner sleeve, and he was really happy with that. And I don't know, he was being really shy and going, when I listen to your music I fall on the floor or something like that. I thought, these crazy Americans. And when they invited us to go on tour with them in England, we were very apprehensive because it looked quite male at some time, the audience. We thought, these boys, they're going to think these witches are on stage and, you know, these old women, and who are they? And they might have not liked us at all.
So you didn't end up going on that tour. What happened?
What happened is that he had an overdose. So the tour was postponed first. Then it was cancelled because he really was not well at all. But because we rehearsed and we were going to do the tour, we ended up doing some gigs here in the States as well. And when we were in the van, in those days, you know, people didn't have mobile phones or cell phones, as you call them. So we didn't know he had died. The whole world probably knew, but we didn't know. And then we got to the venue, and when we were on stage to play, Ray Farrell from Geffen came to us and said, I'm sorry, it's bad news, Kurt has died. And I was just really shocked. It was a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah.
You are someone who seems like you've always been creating, and you continued to create after the Raincoats broke up. When I went over to your house when I was in London, I saw you playing with a modular synth. And I was so impressed. It just looks like old telephone operator stuff. And I was like, how you taught yourself? Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, after the Raincoats, I did the solo album called The Lighthouse, which was done on a small digital thing, synthesizer, I suppose, that had lots of sounds in it, and the sequencer, and I did the whole album on that. For me, that was a bit like digital punk or something, and I did the whole album with just this machine and the recorder, and it's just so simple and everything. But now I've gone completely the other way. When you came to my house, you saw, yes, a modular synth. I think it's amazing that, okay, the modular thing is a bit complicated, and you have to. I don't have mates or friends that do the thing, and you talk about it. I have to read about it and look on YouTube to learn what you do. But basically, you have a wire coming from one, and it can go pretty much anywhere, and that's when the modules relate, which is amazing. So it's not like I have a clear idea of what I'm going to do, but the instrument is giving me something back as well, and it takes over your life completely, because all you can think of is my next module. And you kind of spend so much time. It really is quite time consuming. I don't recommend it, but I love it.
So it also makes me think of, what is your legacy, and what do people come up and say to you, and how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel absolutely great. A lot of people say, we started the band because of you. And lots of bands. Recently we went to see the Downtown Boys and Priest, and they just, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. It probably isn't exactly, but that's what they said, and they feel that way. And it's not just how many records you sell, it's just if you inspire people like we were inspired, I think it's really good. I was just going to tell you a story. Yesterday, somebody asked me to sign a poster, and he said that his 7-year-old daughter was listening to the Raincoats in her room, and her mother went into the room and said, "What's this racket?" And she said, "It's the Raincoats." And she said, "Who's the Raincoats? Who are the Raincoats?" Everybody knows who the Raincoats are. She's 7. I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah, that would be it right there. Like, that's the reason I'm doing this.
Yeah,
I wonder.
that made my day. Besides everything else that we did, it really made my day.
Ana de Silva, It was such a pleasure talking with you today.
Thank you, Allison Wolfe.
You're welcome.
A pleasure to spend some time with you too.
The Band is brought to you by Tidal On Air and is produced by me, Allison Wolfe.
And me, Jonathan Shifflett.
You can find our podcast by going to tidal.com/us/onair or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RealBabyDonut. Bye.